This is the In Context podcast with your host, Karin von Hippel.
Welcome to In Context, RUSI's new podcast with me, Karin von Hippel, the Director General at RUSI. Today it's my pleasure to be speaking with Ambassador Mona Juul of Norway. Ambassador Juul is most well known for the really important role she played in the Oslo peace talks. Welcome, Ambassador Mona Juul, to RUSI and to this week's edition of our new podcast called In Context. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I've been poring over your very busy life. You've done so many interesting things. You probably are best known for one of the main negotiators in the Oslo Peace Accords, but we'll come to that a little bit later. But we like to always start at the very beginning. And so I gather you were born in a town that I'm going to mispronounce. It looks like you could actually say stinker, but it's not pronounced that way. Is it? How do you pronounce it?
That was not very correct, if I may say so. But it's Steinkjer, but it's very Norwegian and it's very small place in Norway. Up in the, it would be considered to be quite north, but it's actually only in the middle of Norway because Norway is such a long country.
Right. And you were raised on a dairy farm.
I am indeed, very sort of agrarian background. So I don't know why I've ended up living in the big cities all the time.
Yes, we're gonna get to that now. But did you learn how to milk a cow and make cheese and all sorts of things like that?
Absolutely, yeah, because it was a dairy farm where the farmers brought in the milk, and my father was sort of the director of the farm, and he was making blue cheese, which was sort of a lot of care and a lot of work needed to go in to make good quality blue cheese.
And milk, obviously.
And milk, obviously, yeah. So we had a little shop there as well, but it was a real sort of factory. Yeah. But of course, by the time it got more centralized, and it was in the end sort of became they sort of shut it down in order to have bigger factories and bigger. So, but the place where it was even a smaller place than Steinkjer. It was a little outside that little city, so we have very sort of rural.
And how many generations of farmers have there been in your family?
I think it's my father's fathers had the same profession, and I think we are all coming from a very sort of farming background.
Now, do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 4 brothers.
And are they in the farming business?
No, none of them.
None of you?
No, I think we are a very sort of traditional family growing up. At the time when I grew up, from the sort of where I have all my brothers are elder, but starting from sort of the 60s, 70s, 80s, that we all had to go or leave home in order to get an education. So
right.
So I did exactly that. Went to Oslo to study
for university. But you stayed in
for high school.
I won't pronounce the name of the city because I don't want to do what I did earlier. So you went to University of Oslo and studied international relations.
Yes.
So how did you decide on that as a field, though? Were you always interested in the world beyond the farm?
No, probably not. I think that sort of I was more interested in sort of becoming a sort of more like a social worker. I was sort of very much into sort of the more sort of, what should I say, humanitarian side of society, and wanted to be sort of helpful with people sort of not doing as great as most of us. But when I came to Oslo and started to study, I got involved sort of with friends and in the sort of the milieu over there that was sort of quite politicized and much more sort of international than what I was used to, and I immediately got very sort of fascinated by the bigger world.
Yeah, well, that's what happens to most of us.
I think so.
I came from Alaska, which is not exactly a booming metropolis state, and ended up in international affairs as well. Sometimes I think when you come from more rural areas, you're desperate to see the world.
No, exactly.
Everyone is a different. And then you went to the LSE.
I had just 1 year at the LSE, being privileged enough to have a status as a sort of a research student, that it was called at the time, working on my thesis, which at the time would be sort of comparable to know a master, or but at the time maybe more like a PhD. But I worked on it here, but I graduated from the University of Oslo.
We just missed each other because I was there from 98 to 93. So
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a very good friend in the Norwegian Foreign Ministry who was with me.
Yeah, right.
But so that's where your interest must have. You must have been much more interested in international affairs when you were here in London and studying.
Absolutely, and then of course, I had already decided through my bachelor and later on my studies at the University of Oslo that I sort of wanted to. I was sort of very much into. My thesis was well, if I remember still, nationalism and self-determination in the Horn of Africa.
How fast? I did nationalism and self-determination.
You did?
I did it on sort of more Gibraltar, Western Sahara, and Morocco, North Africa. How funny is that? Well, I guess, did you study with James Mayle at LSE? Yeah, he was my supervisor. So
he was mine too.
Right. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you then decided to join the foreign ministry, right?
I did immediately, and after my study, and it was little by accident, because when I was at the LSE, my then, I would say, boyfriend, my husband, he called me. He was back home, and he called me, and he said he had met a student colleague of mine at the university where he was teaching, and he had said that he had just handed in the application for the foreign ministry, and the deadline was the day he talked to me, and he said, "Didn't you? I thought you said once that maybe that could be something that you wanted to do." And I said, "No, I don't really think so. And if the deadline is today, I will be late anyway, so why sort of bother?" But then I was sort of thinking about it. And then I called the embassy in Belgravia and asked if, at the time, you had to pick up sort of forms that you needed to fill in. Nothing online. So then they said, no, that's fine. I could come and pick it up. But then I said I won't be able to hand it in before after the weekend. And then they said, no, that's fine. And then I sort of did it, and not really thinking that I didn't think much through it. But then I was accepted, and I started, and since I've been there.
But were you still thinking before that you signed up, or you didn't have an exam then?
We had to go through some tests, absolutely, both a written test and an oral test.
But before that, were you still thinking you wanted to do more social work, or had you already moved
No, then I was already into
international something.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, yeah, 100%, yeah.
Weren't sure what it would mean.
No.
And so then your first posting was to Egypt. So there you are now, burgeoning Middle East expertise, right? Starting
but at the time, not being an expert at all, and it was definitely my last choice. Mm-hmm. And my husband said that I almost cried. I don't know if I cried, but I was really extremely disappointed because.
Where did you want to go?
I applied for some posts in Africa, Zimbabwe actually at the time, and then I think I had Argentina on top of it. I thought I just wanted to go out and and Cairo and Egypt. No, I don't think so. But
it turned out to be a very interesting time to be there.
Turned out to be very, very interesting.
And you stayed for several years, right?
No, I stayed actually only for 2 years there, but it was there sort of where not only my knowledge, but my interest and my passion and whatnot, my heart for that part of the world, I mean, really sort of grew into me in a way that it's been with me ever since.
Because then very soon after, you were part of the small Norwegian team to facilitate the secret negotiations between Israel and the PLO. Now, this happened in Oslo, obviously. They all came to Oslo. Were you already at that point back in Oslo at the foreign ministry, or did they pull you back from Cairo to help with that?
No, absolutely. I went back after 2 years working then on the Middle East issue, and then soon after I came back, my then foreign minister Thorvald Stoltenberg asked me to come and work in his cabinet. So I was there then when the whole thing started to develop. And as I always said, it's such a long story. So how we managed, but you are very right. In the end, we managed through pulling all kinds of strings and with the good backing of, as I said, of my then foreign minister and the foreign ministry, we managed then to bring representatives of PLO and Israel together. Not mainly in Oslo as such, because at least after a while at least, it was important for us to bring them to places outside Oslo, where it was more discreet, because and where nobody could sort of see them, because this was really the whole thing was to keep it secret.
Super secret, right? It's an old diplomatic trick. You go to some very boring town where nobody would recognize you.
No, exactly.
Do you even know what cities you're in, or is that still secret?
No. I think it's all in the open now. But we had to find a place there where they could sort of host. I mean, both Israelis and Palestinians, and with sort of. I mean, there were some. How should I say, cultural aspects with it as well. We have to take care of that. It was sort of proper places to live. They couldn't sort of really share room, not in the beginning at least.
Right.
And we had to sort of to have some proper. I mean, we had to feed them well, and we had to make the nice kind of atmosphere that at least we thought would be a nice atmosphere. And most of the time we ended up in sort of very, maybe a little sort of picturesque and very, in a Norwegian standard, nice and cozy places. But for Middle Easterners, might probably have looked quite.
So these were all in Norway?
This was all in Norway, in the
I
countryside in Norway.
Oh, wow,
and but people coming from that part of the world, I mean, when they go abroad, they normally stay at nice hotels and these were sort of quite simple places, but
huts,
nice. Nice in sort of what we thought was nice. So it was all old farmhouses that were rebuilt and refurbished into sort of nice places, though.
So how many months were you doing this?
We more or less 9 months exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you take breaks so they'd go back home and see their families, and then they fly back, or were you there?
They did, yes. Yeah. And every time when they broke up, they say that this is not going to work. We have to go back and to report to our bosses, but this is very difficult. And so then we also needed, in the meantime, when they were not sitting together, we had then to be on the phone because they were not talking directly, obviously. So we had to talk and send messages between them, also in between the meetings.
Right.
So.
And it was just you and your husband, Terry Larson? Or was
it was the two of us, but absolutely also we had, as I said, strong political backing from the foreign minister, and then from the deputy foreign minister, Jan Egeland, who has been the UN.
Now he's a big Syria.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there were a few others that were involved, but we were a very small team then, in order also to make sure that it didn't sort of leak out what we were doing. So also in the ministry, it was quite few people that knew what was going on, which is not such a popular thing to do.
Right, it's pretty hard to do.
It's very hard to do.
But did the Americans know?
That's also a very long and complex story. Given the fact that we were doing this and dealing with the PLO, an organization that, of course, not Israel, but neither the US were recognizing as somebody to talk to, because it was still considered a terrorist organization.
So it was over a period of 9 months, and you kept. Oh yeah, you were talking about the Americans. Sorry.
Yes.
Would it be just the Americans, or did anyone at the UN, or who else knew of even that it was going on?
Yeah. When it comes to the American, of course, coming from a country where US is our best friends and closest allies, and at the time when this really sort of picked up in the negotiations, we had a change of foreign minister, and Johan Jørgen Holst came in as being a foreign minister, and I think he was sort of very, very sort of close to the US and the US administration, and I think he also felt that it wasn't, initially at least, he felt that it was wrong that we were sort of doing something behind the back of the Americans. We can't do that. And then we told him, because one of the first thing we did was to inform the Americans. But they sort of said on an official level that do whatever you like, but we don't want to be involved as long as sort of the PLO is in the picture. We can't have anything to do with because at the same time the Madrid talks were going on, so they were all involved in that kind of process where the PLO was excluded, and the Palestinian organization was a joint Palestinian-Jordanian delegation, where the Palestinians had to come from the Gaza and the West Bank. So the PLO was sort of out of the picture. But of course, it was a realization, I think, on our part, but certainly also actually from the part of Israel, that they knew that Arafat was sitting in Tunis and pulling the strings anyway.
Right.
So why don't we sort of talk to the real enemy, not those who are sort of representing him?
Right.
So that's why. But that made it also then difficult for the Americans. So we sort of continued sort of insisting that they should be reformed, because we felt that was important, but they sort of were not all that interested, even if they sort of knew. But they didn't get engaged, at least, until the end, when we finally had a deal. Then of course we had to come to them and beg them to support it. And,
well, that's
and
good.
they did.
That's good that they did.
And they did.
Yeah. This is, of course,
but then, of course, I think the Israelis probably also had some contacts with the Americans, telling them, but not the whole story. I think the Palestinians probably informed at least some of it with the Egyptians, because of course they were also afraid of the Jordanians, got also a little upset that they were not informed. So I think there were, I mean, it's all, as I said, it's a very sort of, it's both risky and sometimes a very hard thing to do this, to sort of to because there are so many who feels that they have a stake in it and were not involved.
Right. Oh, yeah, and people can really become spoilers of the situation. So
exactly.
Well, congratulations on that. Even though even though obviously we're far from peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, what you did prove that they can make an agreement, and hopefully that could serve as a foundation for a future peace agreement. Now, of course, that story was then immortalized in the let's just say the award-winning production on Broadway and the West End here, a play called Oslo in 2016. Written by J.T. Rogers, who I gather got to know your husband, and that's how he became interested in the story. I'm very sorry I still haven't seen it, and it left by the time I wanted to go. But of course, the stories and the play is mostly about you and your husband and the behind-the-scenes role that you played. I'm sure there were parts of it that were not true or that you didn't maybe appreciate. But anytime a story is made public of your life, but I gather you come out as the real hero in the play. So of course we have to love that, right? But I do remember hearing stories way back when you were involved in that, of course, or maybe after, and the story came out about what you had been doing, that there were even times when your children, who were very small at the time, were able to reduce tension between the two sides because they would do something kind of silly when the Israelis and the Palestinians are in the room, or is that just some urban myth that came out of this whole thing?
That's mythic. It's I mean, our kids were not even born at the time, so it was not them. But my foreign minister at the time, or at the end of it, and Johan Jørgen Holst, as I just mentioned, he had a small. I think and what his name? I think he was sort of 4 or 5 at the time. So you are correct. There were some pictures and there were some sort of stories that he was sort of there to break the ice and things like that. But I mean, I sort of never really. I mean, there were a lot of stories and a lot of talk about sort of how this sort of came about, and it. Some of us were on the critical part of what we were doing. Some would say, we were just sort of organizing nice meals, and this was sort of just about sort of creating an atmosphere, and we didn't really do anything, and it was the good dinner and a lot of wine and whiskey that sort of brought it about. And the thing about creating a nice atmosphere is true, and I maintain that is extremely important when you are to bring people together. So I have no regret about that. But all these other stories were sort of made up, and it was really hard work from 24/7. I think so.
No, they're not going to sit in the room and just drink whiskey together, right? They need they need a purpose.
And the negotiator. Oh my God, how they worked, and you said the right word, at least earlier in what you said, because we have always said that our role was mainly as facilitators. We didn't sit at the table negotiating the hard. That was the whole idea, that we wanted the parties themselves to have ownership of it. This should be a product that they and you know, as Norway, we are not like the United States. We don't have any carrot nor a stick. We can't force them to do anything. We can't threaten them to do anything. The only thing we can appeal to them to try to solve this alone, and the two of them. And that's why we told them. And the Middle East before that, and I think after, there have probably been too much international involvement. So the whole thing about Oslo was about them getting in direct contact the two main parties and trying to solve the issue without too much interference. We gave them sort of a set of rules that, first of all, you have to do it. Secondly, stop talking and discussing and blaming each other for what has happened before. Drop the history, look forward, see what you can do together, looking ahead, not to... agree to disagree about the past and move forward. And then, but of course, as a facilitator, then your role is also that you become sort of very much sort of a little, first of all, a punching bag of the frustration that both sides will have. Then, of course, they came to us and said, what do you think? They told us now that, do you think they actually have the backing to say so? Do you think this can fly with how? Because so they wanted us to be this kind of, and then of course sometimes we could answer them, other times we just said that we can check out, and that's what we did then. So we then sometimes we flew to Tunis and spoke with Arafat. Other times we went to Tel Aviv to speak with sort of in order to see how. Sort of so that we could, so the messaging that we did sort of, especially then in between meetings, and they really trusted our judgment on the other side. So we became also a little sort of guarantor of the other side, which is also quite a sort of a risky thing to do, because if we said, we absolutely think that Arafat is behind this, and it proved that he wasn't. Our role then as facilitator would have been blown. So
you were a mixture of facilitator, mediator, but it was what was needed at the time. You had to figure it out.
But we didn't sort of go that much into substance, saying we think you should accept this because this is good for you. We didn't sort of had anything of that.
Well, Norway is also known for its role it plays in disputes because you're seen as a neutral party. So Sri Lanka, you have lots of experience in this space. And Ireland has often played that role in international negotiations, right? Because you wouldn't obviously take a side.
No, and we have no sort of colonial history. We have no sort of vested interest around. And we are quite a wealthy country, which also helped them because we are very generous when it comes to our foreign assistance, and we have funds that we can put to the best of these kinds of.
You're very supportive at the UN, etc. Now, the real question is, did you and your husband need a negotiator ever between the two of you?
No, we have always been too busy helping others.
Didn't have any time.
No, exactly.
So today, given how far apart both sides now seem to be, when do you think, peace will come at some point, but when do you think it will come between the two sides?
Now, it's quite, I think I have to use the word tragic. Yesterday it was 25 years ago.
That's right, 25 years on September 13th. That's right, New York Times had a story on that.
That's right, yeah. And I understand, I haven't had the chance to read it, but I understood quite sort of a critical one. And of course there are reasons for all kinds of criticism when it comes also to the Oslo Agreement and the fact that it didn't lead to a two-state solution, which was what it was all about. And I can absolutely come into why, according to what I think are some of the reasons why it didn't succeed. But I still maintain that, first of all, what was achieved then, a lot of it is improved the situation. First of all, because it established a Palestinian Authority, which is still in function, not in a very good shape, you might add, but certainly there is Palestinian self-government one way or the other, even if, of course, still the occupation is still there. But as an authority, is it still working even with these deficiencies? Secondly, what happened in Oslo and what we helped bring about after sort of the what is called the Oslo Agreement was also the agreement of the mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO, which opened up for the US and others also to recognize PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian. Then, as a result of Oslo, also it was possible for the Jordanian Israeli peace agreement, which still exists, and in the first few years after Oslo, what took place then in the development in Gaza and the West Bank, all what was sort of going on was, incredible if you look back and see where we are today. So, as I said, why we are here today now, there are many reasons, but I still think that it can never be wrong to try to bring people sitting together. And it was the parties themselves who decided on how they wanted to proceed. The thing with the Oslo process is that it is a gradual one, because I think everybody realized that it wasn't at the time, at least, not possible to solve all the issues at once. So one wanted to build confidence, and by then, so gradually build confidence, doing sort of step by step, and then the understanding was then that then it would be easier to solve the big difficult issues. That you can say didn't happen because either the Israelis didn't do what they were supposed to do, or the Palestinians didn't do or did what they were not supposed to do. So that confidence started to slip. And that's why sort of the agreement and the process was sort of undermined. And I think one can equally share the blame for that to a certain extent, even if, of course, Israel will always have maybe, at least some will say that Israel would have sort of more of a responsibility as a stronger partner in it. So that, of course, is also something that one can discuss, whether Oslo was sort of a asymmetrical kind of process. Then But I can assure you that the Palestinians and the PLO and Arafat and Abu Mazen, the now president in Palestine, I mean, they didn't give in easily, and they really thought that the peaceful way were the way to go. And I still believe in that. And I think we should still strive for bringing people and conflicting parties together and see how we can move forward. So if you ask me if I because there is no peace now, I have no regret for what we did. I think there are a lot of results that are positive, but we are certainly not there, and that's why we need to continue.
Right. Well, I mean, it's still an incredible achievement, even if it didn't succeed as of yet, let's just say. So getting back to your career, then you then you moved to Tel Aviv, right, as a diplomat?
Yeah, after the Oslo Agreement, I went to Tel Aviv to follow up
to try to implement the agreement.
Yeah, because we after the agreement, Norway took upon it also to lead and spearhead the donor effort for the Palestinian Authority in order to help build up the authority.
Right.
And we still are heading that. It's called HLC, and it was an ad hoc liaison committee in order to, but it's still there. But so and at that time, that was in '94. It was possible to. I was based in Israel, but we worked equally on both sides. So we traveled back and forth, and I met with the Palestinian leadership as I met with the Israelis. That is more difficult these days, but at the time it was completely possible. So I was there for 3 years. At the same time, my husband then was appointed with the then Secretary General Boutros Ghali as the UN envoy for the Middle East.
And was this when Rabin was killed?
That was when Rabin was killed in 1995. We were there at the peace rally in Tel Aviv. It was, I think, 300,000-400,000 people. I mean, everybody was there cheering peace. It started early in the afternoon, so we were there in the beginning, but then we had to leave because we were invited by Yasser Arafat for a dinner that he was hosting. I think it was the Portuguese Prime Minister or something, I can't remember now. But so we left that peace rally, went straight to Gaza, attended that dinner, and at the time when the dinner was about to finish, we were called we were leaving the dinner and going into Arafat's office afterwards, and the message came that Rabin has been killed. And we were sitting then with Arafat, having got that message, and he was completely shattered. He was almost crying, and he said, I lost my partner. Wow. And that was a quite strong thing for the two real arch enemies in that conflict.
But he must have also known that was probably the beginning of the end, at least at that stage, right?
He was a very smart politician, Yasser Arafat, and he understood that Rabin was the guarantee for the peace on the Israeli side.
Right.
And
of course, it was a right-wing Israeli extremist who killed Rabin as well.
Exactly.
So it really derailed the peace process.
He was killed by his own because of Oslo.
Right. Okay, but then you still haven't had enough of the pain, so you went back to Oslo for about a year, and then you came back to Israel as ambassador.
Yeah, I was back for a little while, probably more than a year, but I was then the foreign ministry Middle East envoy, so I spent almost all my time in the region also when I was based back home. But then, at the end of that period, being back home, I was... now I think then I thought maybe even I should start of having children. So then I invested a little bit on that, and then
children, did they went off to Cyprus to be ambassador when you had little babies in Cyprus, or?
No, I was based in Tel Aviv.
Oh, you had babies in Tel Aviv, I see.
Yeah, because I was sort of accredited to Cyprus. So no, they were born in Oslo, but they were only 7 months when I took them to Israel.
Oh, okay.
As ambassador, yeah.
Okay. And
but before that, I had a little stint. Being pregnant, I was deputy foreign minister in Norway.
I'm very pregnant because you had twins.
Yeah. So there was a very short political career, but for good reasons.
Okay, so you were accredited to Cyprus. I get it. While you were there, I see.
Yeah.
And other Norwegians have followed you dealing with Cyprus, although for the UN.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then you went to the UN, Deputy Permanent Representative and Chairman of the First Committee of the UN General Assembly. Now, remind us all what the first committee does. I remember the fifth committee, but I can't remember the first one.
Oh, but that's in your field.
Is it?
Yeah,
it's
the disarmament.
Oh, that's the disarmament.
Yeah.
Okay. You should know that.
So that's my claim to fame. That when I also, given Rusi, so that was a very, very interesting experience to head that committee in the General Assembly.
So a taste of New York, because before this podcast started, the ambassador was telling me that her next post when she leaves London at the end of the year will be the ambassador to the UN, starting in 2019, essentially. So you know, your background negotiating peace in many places will prepare you for the Security Council. Hopefully,
yes. if we get elected, then yeah.
Yeah, well, New York is a bit of a zoo, that's for sure.
That's true.
But when you were there in New York, you were there from 2006 for a year or two, or
no, 2005 to 2011.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay, so you were dealing with the Iraq War.
Yeah,
you were dealing with a number of other big issues that were going on. This was
absolutely no. I had my job for 5.5 years.
So Bush and Obama.
Yep. I started with Bush and then Obama, and then after 5.5 years, I didn't want to leave New York, and my kids were at school, and my husband has as he still has his work there. So, but then my foreign ministry said, no, enough is enough. But then I took a year leave, so I had 1 year.
Spend some time with the kids.
Spend a lot of time with the kids, going with them to school, picking them up, going to them to the soccer and the swimming in asphalt green and on Upper East Side. And it was one of the best decision I ever made in my life was to have that year. And it wasn't bad to have some time off in Manhattan.
Well, also it was such a, you must have been working so incredibly hard in all these jobs. And you didn't have much time to sleep.
No.
Much less spend time with your children, right? And then, of course, in September 2014, you were appointed ambassador of Norway to the United Kingdom, and you're the first woman to occupy this role. But that's probably unique because you have so many women in your foreign service. It just so happened that.
Yeah. But after that year in New York, I went back to Oslo and was heading our department for security policy
in the High North.
And the High North, including the responsibility also for our very important relations with Russia. So those were 3 years where I really felt that both sides could sort of maybe not so much broaden my sort of scope, since in the UN you have to deal with all kinds of issues, but at least I could not only lean on my Middle East expertise, because these were also the part of a another very important part of Norwegian foreign policy, namely, as you said, the High North, Arctic, Russia, NATO, non-proliferation, disarmament issues, and so that was very sort of rewarding, I found, and it was some 3 good years as well. And then I came here.
Yes, and then you came here, and everything you had done prepared you for Brexit. And you probably spent, you didn't realize Brexit was going to happen when you arrived. Nobody really did. And so you had to transition, just like you transitioned from Bush to Obama, and now it would be to Trump. You went from the pre-Brexit to the Brexit referendum, and presumably everyone's saying the Norway model, good thing, bad thing. And so you probably spent a lot of time talking about the Norway model, I would imagine. imagine.
We have indeed, and I think for only good reasons, because we are not offended by people saying that we don't like the Norwegian model, because first of all, it's a very good model for us. It works perfectly well, and we are willing to pay the price it costs in order for us to have access to the internal market, which is for us, it's sort of 60-70% of our sort of trade is with the EU. So for us, this is fine. But we understand that it doesn't necessarily work for a country like the UK. But the one thing that we have spent a lot of time on from the embassy is to also, if I may say so, educate a little the Brits about what sort of the model is all about, because I think it's sort of a lot of things is being said that is not actually sort of the case. But as I said, I really have no problems for those who are saying that is not something that the UK should or. But there are also some who say that it could be good for the UK. But that is up to you to decide, and not. Right.
But does Norway have free movement of people, or is it just a single market?
We are 100% part of the single market, so we accept completely the four freedoms. And the only interesting difference, and it's interesting for the discussion going on here, but we are not member of the customs union.
Okay.
So we have sort of
So there are possible variations on a theme. And,
it is.
Yes,
it is indeed, and of course, it's a lot about the UK position being sort of accused of sort of cherry picking, and that you sort of. But of course, I mean, we have our arrangement with the EU. Other countries have other arrangements. So I suppose it's also for the UK to find a model that, of course, had to be agreed by the by the EU. But still, I mean, there are ways of arranging that cooperation that hopefully could work for both.
Yes. Okay, so we are running near the end of our time together. I'm very grateful for all of your time, but I had two more issues I wanted to discuss with you. One was, of course, the longstanding Norwegian relationship with the United Kingdom and great bilateral relationship, especially with regard to energy, to oil, defense and security. Obviously, you guys are very much more into peacekeeping in many ways. So, but in multilateral organizations, both countries take it very seriously, and you work very closely together on a number of development, human rights, peacekeeping, and other issues.
Absolutely.
We just at RUSI awarded we have an annual book award for the best book in military history. It's called the Duke of Wellington Medal for Military History, and this year's winner was a book by General Sir John Kisley on the Norway campaign. It was called Anatomy of a Campaign, the British Fiasco in Norway, 1940. And it really looked at the British campaign in Norway in 1940, which was widely considered a failure for a number of reasons. Strategically, there were intelligence blunders, German air superiority. The troops didn't perform well. They didn't have the right training. And then, of course, bad judgment in many cases back here. I know you came to our book award when we had the event at RUSI, but presumably relations have not suffered as a result of that campaign in 1940. You managed to patch it up.
Absolutely. And, we are so incredibly grateful for the help we have received from the UK from the very beginning, starting with the Nazi Germany sort of takeover of Norway in 1940, and
exile here for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the king and the whole government fled and came here, and were so well received, and had sort of the tremendous, I would say, support from the British government. But I must admit that it was extremely interesting to learn from that book and the discussion that took place here. I mean, I mean, it was all the good intention on
Right.
the UK side, but the way it sort of failed then in a sense. I mean, there's so much that one could learn from
Right.
that, and about the importance of sort of planning, the importance of leaders having surround yourself by courageous advisor who
Right.
could sort
Speak
of
truth to power and all of
truth
that,
to
right.
power
Yeah,
and all this.
right.
I thought it was incredibly fascinating to.
And all the turf wars, right? I mean, I was
All
thinking,
the
that's what I was
turf
thinking
wars.
of, having worked in government myself, how internally competitive it can be. And,
Absolutely.
right.
So no, there are, and I think even in Norway, in my own country, we haven't sort of been. I think it's getting, there are more and more interest now for what actually took place during the war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more books are coming out, people are more interesting. I think for a long while after the war, people were all about sort of getting it behind us and almost
Moving
forgetting.
on, right.
And there are so many, my parent generation, that sort of, it was so traumatic for Norway, because we were certainly completely sort of rolled over.
Right,
and
you're
we were
occupied.
exactly
Right.
for 5 years,
Right.
and that's quite
Right.
a long time. And it was,
And they were really nasty, the Germans.
they
I mean,
were
it's
really nasty,
yeah,
and you have, of course, those who collaborated, and how
Right.
you sort of reconcile with all this. So I think we haven't really been looking that kind of, and that book is sort of going into sort of a kind of a so thorough research on an aspect of which of course this is of course a British
Right.
perspective, but I think it's extremely interesting, and
Right.
I think we still have a lot to learn from it.
Right. No, it is certainly, we're all still learning so many fascinating things about that war. Now, finally, the last question, which I always like to ask all of our distinguished guests, is what advice would you give today to youngsters who are thinking about a career, foreign policy, international relations, international security?
I couldn't recommend more the kind of career that I have had in the foreign service. I know that is not everybody will have that privilege and the chance to
negotiate peace between the Arabs and Israelis.
No, but I mean also as a career, because I mean sometimes it's very frustrating. It's not so easy to combine with sort of a normal family life, but at the same time it's so rewarding to be able to live in another country, working for your own country, but sort of taking in sort of another country's politics and culture and daily life, and still sort of representing your own country with your own interest, and I have, of course I have nothing else to compare, but I really have no regrets that I have stayed on doing the kind of job that I have been lucky enough to have since I started many years ago.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Mona Juul of Norway. Thank you for joining us in this podcast. We're very sad you'll be leaving London later this year, but thank you for all your support for RUSI as well while you've been here. So we're really grateful.
Thank you, Karin. RUSI is, can I say that?
Yes.
I'm very impressed with RUSI as an organization. I mean, it's always have much interesting stuff going on, and you are so generous with including also diplomats and representatives from other countries, and it's always so interesting to come to your events, and it's probably one of the best places if you wants to get some insights in what's going on in the world. So thank you for being
great.
so generous with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. In our next episode, we will be talking with Kori Schake, the Deputy Director of the IISS. She will be talking about John McCain, U.S. foreign policy, and even an appearance in Vogue magazine.
This podcast was produced by Tom Ascott, developed by Caroline Tranter, with further research from Neil Watling. Keep up to date with the latest defense and security analysis by visiting www.rusi.org.